Well, today's topic is a conversation that I think really everyone needs to have. So I hope with a group or a mentor or a friend or someone in the community, you'll sit down just like I'm sitting down with my friend Alan Parr. Alan, here's what we're talking about today. Is racism still a thing in the U.S.? I mean, come on, aren't we past that now?
Yeah, and it's a great conversation. And as we're going to point out later, I think we need to have more conversations like this, as part of the solution. But, it's interesting, depending upon your demographic, your background, your experience, what part of the country that you are, or the world, or rather, we could look at that and have two different answers, right? From an African American context, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, man, even though I'm educated, even though I've achieved certain things in my life, there's still a major problem that I see. And it really explains why so many African Americans are deemed or viewed as angry or militant, because we're looking at things from a different perspective. Just a couple of basic statistics that many people may not be aware of. In this country, there's definitely a systemic problem in terms of there's a disproportionate number of African American men going to prison for the same crimes that whites will just get a slap on the wrist for. Recently, as a matter of fact, I know that President Trump, after being, I guess, pushed by some major stars and different people, just granted a pardon for a woman who was given 80 years of a prison sentence simply because she had possession of marijuana. And this is an African American lady. And so this is happening all over the country, all over the, within our African American community. Whereas, as blacks, we may see, a white young man who maybe went to college and he went to Yale, and so he's got a future, he's got a promise, and he gets a slap on the wrist, a fine, and maybe some community service hours. And so different things like this definitely, let us know that there's definitely still a problem.
Yeah, I think one of the things, as we talked some time back about our growing up, we're close to the same age, and you shared a story that was, for me, really eye-opening. And I think this is helpful. I think it's these kinds of stories, I think, that would help all of us understand this issue a little bit more. It had to do with golf, right? You're on your golf team.
Sure. Yeah, so here I am in 10th grade, straight A student, not to boast, but just, I was not what most people probably would say, he's that thug African-American kid that doesn't have a future or whatnot. I mean, I was National Honor Society, all those things. I was on the golf team, for crying out loud. I mean, I was the only black on my golf team.
Is that not proof enough?
That should be proof that I'm a little different, for compared to kids my age or whatnot. And so I would never forget this day. We were practicing at our golf course, which was in a predominantly Anglo part of town. And so after the practice was over, I'm sitting on the side of the road with my golf clubs and my golf gear, and there's a police officer that comes, just kind of drives up. And he asked me a question. He says, hey, what are you doing in this area? And I said, well, playing golf. And he proceeds to basically try to put me in his cop car. And I said, what did I do wrong? And he said, well, you know what, sir, there was a there was a purse snatching and a rape because it was committed in this area. And so we're gonna have to take you into the station for questioning. And here I am, 10th grade, I think I'm 15 or 16 years old at the time. And I didn't, this was right around the time of the Rodney King incident. And so we all saw that and was like, well, I don't want to be the next Rodney King. So I just, basically just got in the car, didn't want to rustle playing feathers. And thankfully, as I was getting into the police car, my mother, because I didn't drive at the time, my mother pulled up, and so she gets out the car and she's just frantic, because in her mind, she's thinking, I did all that I could to raise a solid African-American young man who's going to be a good citizen, who's going to, really contribute to this country and this society, and he's being treated, as if he's some sort of thug or his life doesn't matter or whatnot. And of course, as an African-American woman, you don't want to see your son have the same experience as Rodney King. And so she gets out of the car, she goes over to the police car, and I don't even know what she said, because she almost grabbed me away and just told me to get in the car. And then I went in the car and she just spoke to those police officers and just tried to explain to them why they were making a big mistake. And then I'll never forget, my mom got back in the car, and it was about a 30-minute drive from the golf course to home. And she did not say one word the entire time. It's almost like she was just in shock that her son was being treated this way.
And I've heard so many stories like this, and the more I hear these stories, the more I begin to appreciate the situation that there is still racism in the U.S. So Alan, what would you say, and we can talk more about this in another video, but for right now, what is a good first step for people? Like, how do I, I never realized that. How do I help become part of the solution?
Yeah, well, I think, the first thing is, we have to really get to the point, and this is on both sides, African American and white. Right. Obviously, there's racism and prejudice that go along with other races, but for this conversation, I just think we need to eliminate those stereotypes, because all of us, African Americans, we have stereotypes that we look at and say, okay, that's a white cop, so he probably doesn't care about my life. And it's like, well, no, you can't say that, or a white person may look at a guy who's got dreads or he's got locks and he's got a hoodie on and think, oh, he's probably not smart. He's probably a threat to our society, and so let me clutch my purse. I'm in the elevator with this guy. He's probably not safe. Or if I'm a cop, I'm going to have my gun ready because I don't know about this guy. And just instead of having those stereotypes, just really just looking at every person as an individual, but also, as we'll share later, I think just being intentional about having these types of conversations and seeking to try to understand the other person. Like, hey, just like you and I are doing, we had an hour, almost 2 hour conversation about, let me try to understand you and your background and how you were raised and where you're at, in terms of the part of the country and whatnot. And then it was so refreshing for you to just ask me questions. You could say, okay, let me just learn not just only about this guy, but also others in his community. So that way, whenever, the next time you may have a conversation with an African American or you see something on the news, you'd be like, you know what, man, I understand that now a little bit better than I did before.
That's good, and that's what this video is for. We wanted to make this video and so many other videos on our website. It's all designed to help you have a conversation. So my challenge to you is share this video with someone that you need to have this conversation with. Sit down over coffee, use those questions below, and talk about it. I think that's the first step toward really making this issue go away in our culture.